Don't worry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behavioural Science Club as we just click over 4 o'clock and as you all take your time to join us. I'll just give a quick run through about all of the exciting events that we've got coming up in the next few weeks. As you all know, today we are delighted to have Melina with us, Melina Palmer, and we're going to be talking about what your customer wants, her new book, and I'm sure much more besides. And in the coming weeks, Saturday the 26th, we're going to be joined by Lydy Klutz. We're going to be talking about his book, Subtract, the Untapped Science of Less. It's going to be great. We've got Jane Cunningham and Philippa Roberts with us on the Saturday the 3rd of July, talking about brandsplaining, why marketing is all sexist and how to fix it. I'm sure that's going to be great as well. We're talking on the 10th of July with the authors of Framers, a great new book out about the human advantage in an age of technology and turmoil. Sounds extremely complicated to me. And then I'm very excited about the subsequent 2 weeks. Saturday the 17th, we're going to be talking to Sarita Bethea, who's the behavioural scientist at Coca-Cola, who was at Nudgestock. And the following week, we're going to be talking to Guru Madhavan, engineer, author, advocate of inefficiency, also was at Nudgestock. So we've got a great few weeks coming up. But today we are talking with Melina Palmer. I always describe her as great friend of the group, Behavioural Science Club. She was one of our early members and supported me as co-host on one of my Q&As with an author. That was with Bree Williams on her book, Behavioural Economics. And now super Melina Palmer, she's not just brilliant at podcasts and presenting and her super company talking about behavioural economics. She's now an author. And Melina, if you'd like to just unmute yourself and say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody.
To command. Thank you, Melina.
Yeah.
I'm excited about today because I feel like we're sort of talking with a friend. Melina and I can be somewhat competitive sometimes on LinkedIn because we always like to get the last word in on a conversation because we're so fearful of people thinking we might be rude because we didn't respond.
True.
So today I have invited one of our other loyal attendees of Behavioural Science Club, Jing Riley, to assist me on the Q&A. Jing has read your book, Melina, thoroughly enjoyed it, and we had a little chat yesterday and she was saying how great she found it, beneficial in a practical way. And so without any more chat from me, I'm going to hand straight to Jing now. And just before I hand to Jing, I just say to everybody, pop yourselves on gallery view. If you don't mind using your Wi-Fi, let's see your faces on camera so we can see everybody. And now I'll hand over to Jing, who's got some super questions to start us off. Over to you, Jing.
Thanks, Louise. I feel really privileged actually to be interviewing Melina on the call. And I think I just want to ask a quick question of the audience first. So if you put your hands up, if you have come across Melina's book on social media and or have bought the book or whichever, if you heard about a book and saw a comment, a post about the book.
I'll cover my eyes.
No, you have a lot of hands up, don't worry. And the point I was trying to make is that I think you've done an amazing job. I mean, the book is not old. I think it's only published maybe a couple of months ago. And I have a copy and maybe it's the algorithm, maybe it's just because we're part of the club, but I think you're doing an amazing job promoting it. And I get an organic recommendation as well. It wouldn't be something that I would just buy because it just came out. You know, I normally wait for recommendations, but so that's a really big kind of, you know, plus for you, I think, an amazing job you're doing. So to kick off, I'd like to ask you, give us a quick, brief introduction of your book to the people who haven't heard about it or haven't read it.
Yeah, well, This is it. It's called What Your Customer Wants and Can't Tell You. And for a little bit about me, my early background was in marketing and brand strategy, and worked in that space for about 10 years before getting my master's in behavioral economics. And then realizing how at that time, and I think still there's a big shift right now, going from an academic space within behavioral economics and behavioral science into a more applied space. And so actually the 3-year anniversary of starting the Brainy Business podcast is in 2 weeks. I think it was July 6th when the first 3 episodes came out. But when I started my master's, it was all these things that were so clear to me of like how you would apply these concepts for brands and for good communication and pricing strategy, marketing. It just wasn't anywhere. I couldn't find anybody talking about it. And so I said, well, I guess I will. And then started the podcast, and really being the first podcast of its kind, had a bunch of people from around the world. We have downloads in over 170 countries now. Just finding it organically, which was great, and sharing it. And still then the feedback I would get is like, you talk about it and I get it. Like I hear what you're saying, you make it so clear, but where do I start? Was like the question everybody has. Like, I get it, I want to do it, I'm on board, and now what? And so I started making some courses and things along those lines. I've started teaching now at Texas A&M University. And then the book really came out of that, of wanting to have just something that's not a textbook and not a super, super mainstream, just like, we did these studies, isn't that cool book? Because there are a lot of those. But instead to say, if you're in business and you don't want to go become an academic researcher, but you just want to up level in your career, here is a book that can help you understand what you need to know about the brain. Here's 16 of the top concepts that I work with my own clients, some that are most common in 3 years of the podcast, what I hear people bring up as the most common that they use. And then showing them kind of on their own. It's set up like a reference book. So you can have just like a little bit about framing or reciprocity or whatnot. And then part 3 is like combining them into recipes where you can start using them together, and then helping people to not get stuck. But it's really just set up to be a book that helps people apply and go back to again and again when you're working on a new project and what have you. And we might get to this at some point, but because I'm also in that like give first sort of world, I also made an additional 111 page PDF workbook that's available for free for everybody with a bunch of worksheets. This chapters have like a little tidbit about applying each concept, but then it's like, well, but I could have done these 3 other ones too. So there's a whole PDF workbook for that too. So
yeah. I do want to talk about the practicality of the book, because that's the one impression that I got from reading it. And maybe I'm 80 pages to finish, but I think I've got, I've read the majority of the book now. And what really stood out is you even have a section at the very beginning called How to Use This Book.
Yeah.
And then in each chapter, what you did was you divided into different sections, and almost kind of aligned with how our brain works, is that you want a little bit of a theory, and you want to know what it is about, and you want to know and then you need to kind of understand it better by learning the examples. And then at the end, and you give people, actually, do you know what, I'll let you to talk about it, and how you construct the practicality of the book that other books don't have. And I think that is a highlight of.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I think it's great to hear someone who's reading it and experiencing it, that they appreciate that is great. So, but for me, like you said, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure book. If you remember those from childhood, I don't know if they were like around the world everywhere, but it's like you get to the end of a chapter. It's like, do you want to go here or do you want to go there? And like flip to this page, and then you can go there and see how your story ends. It's a little bit different each time. And so in this case, so when you're in part 2 of the book, which is those 16 concepts. It's giving you like, hey, if you liked this about time discounting, which I guess time discounting comes up later, but pain of paying. If you like this chapter on pain of paying, like you'll see pain of paying again in these 3 chapters in part 3. And then when you're reading, or you can listen to this podcast episode in the book is 300 pages, actually 299. I have been asked if there was a reason why it was 299 instead of 300. And it did just work out that way, but no brain science behind it. But for 299 pages, and it has 201 citations. So it all fits perfectly into its neat little bucket. But I mean, really, it was thinking through what you need to hear at each point to keep moving forward. I'm also a big fan of, I would say, like Dan Brown as an author, where it's short chapters and like you get to the end of one where you think, I'm just going to read one more, just one more, and then I'm going to bed. And then you read it and you're like, okay, but that was only like 4 pages. I can read one more. And then you just kind of keep going. And, before you realize it, it's 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So
it's the
kind of the best
cliffhanger, isn't it? It's that when you cliffhanger, you leave a cliffhanger at the end of each chapter.
Yep. Yeah.
People are just
so
waiting.
As much as I could make that happen in a business and behavioral economics book was sort of what I was wanting. And it has been really fun when I've been having people interview me for their shows and things where it's like, that have had no, like people in marketing or whatever that don't really have exposure yet to behavioral science. And they'll say, like I set aside like an hour or 2 to skim through your book before we were going to talk. And I was up all night. I couldn't stop reading it, which is not usually something you hear with a business book. So that's been just really great. So the intent was to make it bite-size enough that you want to keep going and that you have the ability to go back and reuse it again and again. I think for me, the worst thing would be to find out that it just sat on a bunch of shelves and no one ever used it. I just want everybody to get value out of the book.
And the other thing I kind of noticed is that you have referenced quite a few other authors in your book. And also you have, you've done the Brainy Business kind of podcast for 3 years. So I would like, we all, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I think I saw your post recently about interviewing Robert Cialdini, and we kind of all sort of admire you for getting this face-to-face interaction with lots of famous people. So can you give us some kind of, the highlights, the best person you've interviewed and come across and who inspired you probably write the book?
So with Cialdini, that episode came out yesterday. I'm very excited about that one. And I'll talk about this in answering your question, but I actually haven't had to pitch people in general for the show. Most of the guests, I've either had like a past guest or connection introduce someone, or they have found me. And for Cialdini, that was one of the first where I was like, okay, I'm gonna hit send. Like, felt very uncomfortable about it. I had talked with Louise about this a little bit a couple months ago, but so I get nervous with that sort of thing too, but sometimes you just suck it up and hit the button and that all works. But I would say my style in general, like Louise was saying, and as I was talking about with the workbook, is I feel I'm pretty constantly just trying to help people get connected and give additional information and not necessarily asking for stuff back. And so I have found that when I do put something out in the world and say, hey, will you help me with this? That there's a really positive response that's bigger than what I expect. And so for some of the timeline with, I signed a contract with my publisher in like late May 2020, like mid to late May. And at that point, we were still not sure the direction that the book was going to go and what they wanted it to be, if it was going to be this kind of general behavioral science stuff or pricing strategy more focused, because I, teach and do a lot with that. So then, late May, land on this. We'll just do the main behavioral economics stuff. And my completed manuscript was due at the end of August. So this was like, basically I have June, July, and August to get the entire book done. And so having all my travel canceled made to where that was actually possible last year. So I spent, 2.5 months writing the book. And then it was like late July, I would say, to where I was feeling pretty good. I got a flow of stuff. And most of what is part 3 was not as it is now. And I put just a little tidbit out on LinkedIn saying, hey, like, who has applied stories that might be able to come into this book? Like, will you help? I'm working on this. And in general, applied stories are typically pretty hard to come by because in industry, companies don't want to give away their information and it's really locked down and there's not stuff you can share. So I wasn't expecting, I was like, oh, okay, I'll get a handful of things that will come back. So I posted that late July and it was like 200 people that reached out, including Jez Groom and Richard Chataway, Aline Holsworth, like all these people, like, I've got something, and just a huge span to where it's like, I have to make it happen. I have to interview as many as I can get through and just do it, make it happen. And so in that process, them sharing information with me and setting up then, reverse side interviews for them to be sharing on the podcast because the stories were amazing. It just sort of organically shifted the entire focus of what the book ended up being. And it's so much better for it. And so I think, if I hadn't asked all that and all of like this last year of the podcast, like just wouldn't be there. And so with a lesson of, why not, right? Put it out into the world and see what happens. And you may be very pleasantly surprised with who comes back.
That is the application of the law of attraction, isn't it? Ask the universe and the universe will give you what you want.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then, for Cialdini's rules of influence, right? That's, you've got the, I think I'm likable, but there's the likability.
And if you get one,
giving reciprocity and then not ask, when I do ask, like I said, stuff comes back. So.
I'm actually pleasantly surprised and also shocked that it took you 3 months to write the book. I mean, like, I wish I really can do that. I mean, like, I'm sure that people probably, if I can take 3 months off and write a book, and that would be amazing. So there are lots and lots of examples in the book. So I want to ask you, the next couple of questions will be about you sharing some of the tips, as you embarked on this journey of becoming the author. How did you collect the information? I know you can ask people to give you help, but how did you categorize all this information? How did you collect all these examples? Because there are so many of them, and then they're not the ones. Some of the ones that we know it's because they're from other books, but you put in a lot of your own example as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It was important to me to not where, the Ariely economist example is fantastic and it is oft shared for a reason. However, I didn't want that to be like the only thing in the relativity chapter, trying to find what else is out there. And so the way that I was really prioritizing and doing some stuff with the book. So one, as a disclosure / caveat, would be very, very early when I first started doing freelance work, when I was still working in corporate space, I did ghostwriting for people and was a book editor for a couple of years, just like on the side, where a friend of mine helped people get their books written. And so she would send stuff to me. So doing those big edits of the, like, this point really feels like it should move over here, and just thinking about it as a whole for a book. So I did that for others for a couple years. So having some idea of the process was helpful. It is by no means the same as writing the book, though. There's a lot more that goes into getting the thing written and having to sit. And there were plenty of days where you just have to sit there and you write something, and then the next day you realize it's all a big pile of garbage, and then you start over and you have to be able to move things around. But I used a system I really love. It's a free software called Stormboard, which is like virtual Post-it notes. And you're able to move things around. Let's see if it'll let me share my screen. I can actually show you because that's how I roll. I'm good with showing things. So let's see. If it's, yeah.
We really are getting the practical tips of how to write a book. Brilliant. Thanks.
At some point, I stopped like turning things to be gray, essentially, as I was doing them. But so this is the Stormboard system. So there are these like virtual Post-its, which reopen. Okay, it's not wanting to let me just open it for goodness sake and let me show this. So, you can move the Post-its kind of where they need to go. And you can see I have the 4 parts of the book. And as I was keeping track of different word counts, and as I was making a Post-it, it was like, I know I'm going to have a story in here, but I'm not sure exactly where it's going to go. So it's yellow, and then maybe it'll fit over here or over there. And you can combine things together. These are cool. You can turn them into, like, as you see here, where they become like instant little like index cards, and you can pull them out or move them around, and you see the full board. So having kind of an idea of what I wanted, but then being able to move them. I was keeping track of word counts here, but if I wanted index cards for relativity and all the stories I thought I might include, things that didn't really make it, as I was just planning them, getting them out of my brain and into a spot, essentially. That is the main thing that I used to kind of keep me going. And as I heard different, like if I would read something or hear something and think, oh, that's a great quote. Actually, when Rory was in the Behavioral Science Club, and there were a couple things he was saying that I was like, post it, post it, post it, post it. I can go back. We'll see if any of them make it in, but they just need a place to live. So yeah, Stormboard is really great for that sort of, if you like Post-its, but don't want to worry about them like falling off the wall and losing their stickiness, that's a good thing. And you can put in like images and links and all sorts of stuff in there. So that's my big tip.
Big secret. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And just force yourself to write. That's the other thing. You just have to do it, even when set aside some time and do that. My episode on planning fallacy will help you think through some of that, perhaps.
Yeah, great. So now you are a published author, and this is your first book.
Yeah.
And so tell us about being a published author. What is the kind of the delight factor, and that you haven't experienced before, that transformation, and that become a famous and known person?
Well, I feel like famous is a bit of exaggeration at this point, but I appreciate that. Hopefully that will come in time. I will say what's really cool is with the podcast, having people share things I love too. And there's still much more sharing and stuff that's happened with the podcast. But often it's like people are resharing their own. If you share something from the podcast, it shows art that the Brainy Business created about it, right? And so when it gets shared on social media, it's still the same graphics and whatever that I made. And so it has a different gravitas when you see somebody being like, look what I got. And there's actually like a physical thing that they're sharing and taking their own pictures. And now where I've had a couple where people are putting in quotes where it's like, read this, and like sharing the quote of something I said on, Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn as like, this resonated, and I couldn't help but share it. And I feel like when when it's in that written form, even if you hear it on a podcast, then you listen to everything else and you forget that you wanted to share something. And so I think with the book, when you can highlight things, or, people go back and share that in a way that's really fantastic. So that is very, very delightful for me when people are sharing their like favorite quotes of the book. And so far, it has all 5-star reviews on Amazon, which is great. I know the trolls are coming. That's the thing, right? You just have to be okay with when someone's going to give me a 1-star review or something, and I shall accept it. But seeing people from around the world sharing it, and people that I've never met before or talked to, is fun. It's hearing those stories and things. I think people just share books in a different way than they share podcasts and things at this point. So, yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me, and you are ready for the troll, and I think it is a really good mindset that we can all be ready for the negative, potential negative comments, or the feedback that we get from the world. But I remember seeing this ad, a coffee shop that was really smart, and they used some of the psychology in it as well. And on the blackboard, and they said, "Come in and try this coffee that one customer on TripAdvisor and said it was horrible." So even if you get a 1 or 2, people give you 1 or 2 stars. And, the way we know, at least you're going to have the technique there that you can apply using these to your advantage, and saying that, come and read this book that, the only person, just one person said it was terrible.
Yeah. I actually, so I think it might not have been the exact day the book came out, but within a couple of days. So I believe it was Kurt of Tim and Kurt from Behavioral Grooves, because I got emails from lots of people. But Kurt, I think, sent me an email that said, like, here's hoping you get 4.7 stars, like a 4.7 star review was the subject line of this, to which he said they had just talked to Cialdini, and that he had told them about how, studies are showing that if you're between 4.2 and 4.7 stars, you're more likely to be believed. And so it was like helping you to feel good about, if you get that bad review, that it's like actually helping you to look more credible. Katie Milkman's book came out the week before mine, exactly 1 week before. And so we were kind of bonding and emailing through that process as we're both like writing and getting things printed and published and all that. And so I had shared that with her as well. And she's like, oh, that helps. Her book, you talk about getting lots of great publicity. Her book is doing fantastically well. So that was, she's like, thank you. Because she had already had all your, so yeah.
Right. I only have one last question, which is the one that I'm going to ask you first. If you were to describe your book in one word, which word would you use?
I got to go to my trusty go-to word that I bet for everyone that's listened to the podcast or received an email from me, you maybe already have it in your brain, but it would have to be thoughtful. Would be my word. So I end every episode of the show with, remember to be thoughtful. And that's the closing on my emails. And the name of my group is the Be Thoughtful Revolution. So just both, I guess, all the ways of, thinking through the way it's presented to make sure it's in the best way for the person that's going to be reading and receiving it. And just helping people to think differently. Thoughtful is pretty much my word all the time. So that's what I try to keep.
It is a great word. And I've seen it a few times, actually.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. You're very good at including these because of your marketing and branding experience. But from a reader's perspective, your thoughtfulness have come across and been perceived, from my perspective, is this book I felt was empowering. So that was the words that I was going to use.
Oh, great.
Because when I read it, and I felt that you didn't hold back on sharing everything you know, and you also made it really easy to apply. Basically, you want people to take away this knowledge and use in the world. So you're empowering everybody who read the book and go and do amazing positive changes or make whatever impact that we want to make. And you made it so easy that I can always just flick through if I needed something, and I know exactly where to go. And
Yeah.
you know, not every book have that kind of, you know, structure where you can just, it's like indexed. It's so easy
Oh, well,
to find. Yeah.
thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. I would like highest possible praise and compliment. So thank you, Jing. That
No
means a lot.
problem. No, they're all genuine because, you know, I just read and it's quite fresh as well. So that's, you know, that's all my questions. So thank you so much. And I'm going to hand it back to Louise, and I'm sure she's going to, you know, have other questions for you as well. And maybe audience will have questions to ask as well.
Seen some
So
popping up
thank you
in
for
the chat.
having me. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for that fantastic introduction to the book and super questions, Jing. And I'm sure I'm not delighted to not be hearing me rabbiting on as usual. Prakash, I don't know if you want to come and join Melina now with a question of your own. And then, of course, we will be taking all of your questions who've taken your time to join us today.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Jing. Melina, welcome to the show. I see there are a couple of new people out here. I can particularly see two young folks, fine gentlemen. One is named Dan Bennett. Second is Jafar Baig. I'm assuming these are fine students, enthusiasts, maybe pursuing their bachelor's degree in behavioral science. They look like pretty young people in the field. So guys, please feel free to reach out to them and guide them through this whole session if they're confused. Melina, lovely book. So, and I know there are a lot of questions people have, right? So I'm trying to make sure I put up one question, a tight question, then we can quickly move on to the audience side. In your book, you have this one line which I read. It said, use questions to illuminate, to provoke a discussion or to challenge biases. And the question is how? And the second is again tied to the same question. You have, and guys, do not be taken by 3 months. Okay, it's not 3 months. That's total BS. She has got 157 episodes with fantastic folks from all over the world out there, right? So
Yes.
It's a really long experience, a lifelong experience which is coming in the book. So there is always there, right? So do not be fooled by the 3 months, guys. The question is, number one is, speaking with all those different personalities from the world of behavioral science over the course of a long podcast, are we in more trouble than before as a generation? Because we can't seem to agree on anything anymore. And if you go down to the root of it, it goes on to biases, saying, I think what I know is the right answer. So why do I need to listen to you? You are the one who is wrong. So, which is why I'm bringing back this line from your book, and you say, use question to get people to open up. And the trouble is, questions are the things which is causing the disagreement in the first place. The moment I go and tell Louise, you know what makes you think that this is the truth? Now I'm questioning her. She comes back to me with another question, and now we have a big disagreement, right? How do we use questions to, open things up for ourselves? How do we do that, Melina?
Yeah. So I will say that the framing of the question is very important. And I have a story sort of in the book where I talk about how, when I worked in like corporate marketing and people come to me and say they want a brochure. And I know that brochure is like a general term that people that aren't in marketing would use to say they need help with something, but they don't necessarily have the right way to communicate to me. And while that means something very specific to a marketing person, to someone else is just like, I found a gap in my process, I need help. And in that way of saying like, well, tell me more, like, what are you hoping to accomplish? What's the point of this piece going to be? And being very open to where the question can go versus if I would have said, you don't want a brochure, you don't know what you need this, then clearly I would have had a lot of paper cuts on my face of people throwing stuff back at me, right? Because that does not go over very well. So if you are approaching your questioning to force someone to show that you are right and they are wrong, it will never work out very well. If instead you can go in with an open mind and to say, to know that what they're communicating can still be right. I teach a class on internal communication and change management and using behavioral science to help with this. And trust me, like, so that is one of the next books is like a focus on this kind of aspect of stuff. But I had to force myself to not allow it to be in the book because I didn't have enough words available. I have plenty of words. The publisher would not let me write a 1,000-page book. So with that, I like to give an example of talking, like showing an image and give everybody, say like, you have 5 seconds, like, what's this picture about? And then take it away and tell me one thing, you know, and people are like, it's trees, it's out by the ocean. It's it's a city. Looks like the Mediterranean, whatever. And being able to say like, sorry, you're all wrong. There was a red boat at the very tiny little boat at the foreground. Like, that's what the picture was about. Like, get it right next time. Like, sorry. Which is ridiculous, but that's how we approach conversations with people, right? Like, all I care about is the boat, and anything else you're seeing is irrelevant. And someone else says, no, it's about trees, and they say it's about mountains. And it's just a bigger picture than what you're actually looking at. And so this twist on Rory Sutherland's of the opposite of a good idea is still a good idea, being we can be saying different things and both be right. And that's okay. But looking that we're trying to shape really a bigger picture and conversation. I think as far as, like you were saying, in the where we are now and future of the space, and a possibility of where we truly could, whether you like the phrase of shoot ourselves in the foot or get hung up in our own garbage and not be able to move forward, is fighting over the nuance to whether it's for someone to establish that they're smarter. So like, I'm going to prove why you're wrong and I'm actually the smartest person in behavioral science, or whatever it happens to be. Like,
But
fighting over
Melina,
terminology is just not going to work out well.
Thank you for this. The big challenge, it's so much satisfying for us to tell you, Melina, you're wrong. I'm right. That's an amazing feeling, right? That's, I think, where the whole, one of the big challenges coming from. Maybe, it's one of those things people have suggestions saying, practice positive visualization every morning, or practice gratitude every morning. Maybe people should kind of popularize the fact that practice the fact that you could be wrong. Tell yourself every morning. Maybe there is a way of constantly reminding ourselves. Maybe that should become popular. I don't know. You would know better. But Louise, I want to invite you in out here. We should start with the Q&As.
Well, so just to go with that, I have in the I've written an article that's talking about like the stuff hanging in your office. Like, if you are discouraged going to work every day, like, take a look at what you have hanging around you in your space, because priming is very powerful on our mindset as well. So I'm a big fan of sarcasm. Like, it's my jam, to be sure, but I don't have a bunch of like hang in their cat posters and TGIF and case of the Mondays, right? Like, sort of stuff around, because I know that it's going to impact the way that I'm approaching my business, and I don't want that. And so if you assume the person you're talking to, this confirmation bias, that they're going to be curmudgeonly and difficult, you're going to approach it differently than if you're having a conversation with your best friend, to where you can challenge each other and know there's a lot of trust there. So there are a lot of biases at play, but it kind of starts with you, of not trying to prove others wrong. And again, knowing that we can all be right, and help expand and figure out a scope and just be more open-minded. And really quickly, because you were talking about how much, with the years of the podcast helping to shape the book. So when the publisher first asked, when it was like, so here's what we need for the manuscript, and they said to be between 35 and 50,000 words. And I think for most people, it's like the short side is like, oh gosh, how am I going to write 35,000 words? And I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to keep this to 50,000 words? And so I started by pulling in, because for the podcast, I have full scripts for the solo episodes. So I pulled everything in just as like a starting point, I'm thinking, and I'll kind of see where I am. And it was without any like in-betweens, just the stuff. It was about 200,000 words and that's like basically just what would have been part 2 of the book. And so culling that down and adding new stuff, there was a big starting point of research and back work that went into it to get it done in 3 months. So yes.
Thank you so much, Melina.
Yeah.
There are more questions, but there are even more questions on the chat box. Louise, please do the honors.
Thanks so much. Super stories there, Melina. And absolutely the skill is to pare it back as opposed to have it all in there, as you know, with the editing. Now, way back at the start of the chat today, if she's still with us, Niluka Kavna, you had a question for, hi, way back when. I'm sure you've waited for so long. Would you like to put your question to Melina, Niluka?
Absolutely, and thank you so much, Melina. It sounds so fascinating and also really interesting hearing about the process you took when you were creating the book. But my question really is, what is your favorite topic or chapter in the book? And I know on that board you shared there were a number of different heuristics and biases on there. What is your personal, when you were writing it, or the concept that you really love? Because I think everyone has something that they really enjoy, and I'd love to hear, what that was, what that is for you.
Yeah, it's like the hardest one, but I would say as far as in concepts of the 16 that exist in part 2 that each have a chapter, there's a reason that framing is first. I think it is the most foundational and the easiest for people to be able to apply and start testing on their own and see some results without a lot of fear of something that could go wrong, like if you go too big and whatever. So concepts, I would say, is framing. As far as something that I came up with for the book, I would say there are 2 little, I really love as far as where I was talking about, you can, that properly applied behavioral science allows you to throw darts while your competition is still throwing noodles at the wall, which is a fun little tidbit that I really enjoyed. And then people were asking me what do you mean throwing noodles? It's to test if they're done. So it's not perfectly universal, but I still like that. And I would say the concept of behavioral baking is one that's helped to resonate really well. So that's the first chapter of part 3. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks
May I
so much.
ask why framing is your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, really for what I said, I think it's just knowing that a slight change of the way you say something, even where, with Prakash of saying tone or well, why do you think that is very different from, well, that's interesting. Can you tell me more? The slightest tweak of the way that you approach a conversation or talking about, I use the example all the time of if you're buying ground beef and it's labeled as 90% fat free and the stack next to it is 10% fat, which one do you want to buy? And most everybody wants the 90% fat free because it just feels better. Same thing, but your brain hears it differently. And so in that way, to tell people, because I, for consulting and stuff, just look at where are you talking in 10% fat that you can make a slight change to where people will hear it as 90% fat free, or even bigger is where are your competitors? Where's your entire industry talking 10% fat? And you can be the one person, the one company that's in this 90% fat free space. And it can help you to win without having to change anything else. It's cost effective, easy to test. You can A/B test that all day long and be making progress and learning from it. So I'd say that's why.
Thank you so much, Melina. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, Niluka. And the podcast, or rather the subject that Melina was just talking about there, behavioural baking, is a relatively recent podcast. It's a great fun one. If you want to listen to that, you can hear Melina talk about behavioural economics and baking cookies, which is 2 of our favourite subjects. So that's really cool. Andy Horry, you've got a very good question. Can you join us, put your question to Melina?
Yeah, so I noticed you mentioned pricing strategy, I think, in this talk earlier. And I was just thinking about the broadness of marketing, if we're like amongst the 4 Ps and stuff, but then the perception oftentimes is that it's just communications, or just like creative communications. And I just wondered if there's like, you think that behavioral science insights and whatnot can help us shift the perception in the world, sort of thing, of in terms of the way that a lot of people look at marketing, and even people that might be in the boardroom sort of thing, looking at marketing and thinking that marketers can't sort of decide about product and price and things like that. Yeah.
I know nothing about that. Haha. Yeah. Yes. So I am teaching a class on pricing strategy and product development right now, and how behavioral science ties in on that. And so the short answer being, yes, it can absolutely help, and understanding how the concepts apply. I do have, so actually episode 5 of the Brainy Business podcast is called The Truth About Pricing. And I have stuff about, like, if you're looking to raise your prices as a different episode, and looking at how you present products. So framing, of course, comes in there. There's a chapter on pricing in the book, but it's really, again, the way that you talk about it, and helping to show. So one of the biggest struggles, you're talking about marketers in the boardroom or on an executive team, if you're at a company where it feels like, oh, the soft, fluffy stuff of marketing. I know a lot of businesses have that. I was a marketer in a financial services world, to where, it's all the money and marketers don't know things sort of mindset for a lot of people. And so I think that behavioral economics, behavioral science allows for the marketers to have some science behind what they are saying, and things that marketers have known for years, but haven't had that like tangible thing that you're able to point to, a research study, an academic journal, something that shows in a way that you can communicate in the language that the other people on the team, want to hear. And will respond well to, so when I was at the credit union, and I wanted to change, as the head of marketing, the entire brand, and I was then pitching to the executive team that I want to take the entire marketing budget and move it all away from product completely and just focus on branding. And having to convince the chief lending officer, the chief financial officer, and then the entire executive team, very much they were people that could have tanked it, because I'm basically saying, like, yeah, we're never going to have an ad again about home loans, auto loans, like, just forget it. It's all brand stuff. Okay. That doesn't necessarily go over very well, but I had multiple meetings with them before the big meeting, and saying, like, what would make you say no? What would make you say yes? How can we make this be a win? Really going in with those good questions, having meetings to where CLO and CFO are totally on board. Then we go into the executive team meeting, and I'm able to say, names changed, but like Sue and Joe have already, like, we've had meetings, they're good with it. And they say, yeah, I'm good. Then you have that like snowball. Everybody's like, well, if they are good with it, we're good too. And, the entire rebrand and shifting the entire marketing budget is approved in one meeting. And then I say, oh gosh, why did I do that? Because now I have all this stuff to do. But, and we, tripled brand awareness in less than 2 years. So it can work if you apply those same strategies. So
cool. Nice.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Andy. Very good question. I feel like Melina could have done a whole talk just on that particular subject.
Yeah, like I said, that book is coming. The change management one is coming. They're in the works.
Absolutely. Renusha, you had a question for Melina. Are you still with us, Renusha?
Yes. So hi, Melina. So
Hi.
I was actually wondering, if you were to write a book which said what your citizens wants and can't tell you, what do you think would have been different if such a book is what you were attempting at? Because I see a lot of governments trying to do things because they think this is the best, but finally when they end up rolling a program, it does not work the way they assumed it would, and it goes all over the place. So what are your thoughts on that? I'm hoping you write a book like that soon.
Yeah. Are you giving authorization if I want to use that as a title, that like you're gifting that? I'll mention you. So I am definitely, like I said, looking at, I think there's an opportunity for this to be something in the series space. And so I love that verbiage. So thank you for that. I think that a difference would be probably in the examples that exist, the academic research and honest. So in one way, it would be much easier to write because all the nudge units of the world really work in that public policy regulatory space in a way that is, there's a plethora of stuff to be able to share. The reason it would be a lot harder is because there's a plethora of stuff to be able to share, like be buried under all the research forever. But I think if you look at the concepts would probably be pretty similar. There would be a few that would probably swap out. I think time discounting, which I have just a little bit at the end, would be one of the main concepts because people procrastinate. Understanding human behavior would be a little bit different, and knowing where people think they know what they want, and so they will tell you that they want something and that they hate something else. And I think in a public, like in that citizen space, you want to give people the ability to weigh in on what they do want, and then you try to give them what they said they wanted and it's not, and then nobody takes that action. And I think in when you're looking at nonprofits or not-for-profits, are really trying to also, there's this struggle with, we are so passionate about the thing, and if we just educate you on all the stuff that you need to know and you get it, you're gonna do it too, right? And that just doesn't work. So I think it would be a lot in the understanding, I've been asking companies this question recently as I've been doing a lot of trainings and stuff, this like, do you care, is it more important that people understand and can quote back a bunch of stats to you and they don't change their behavior? Or do you want the behavior change and they might not do it for the reason you want them to? Like if you have to pick one, what actually matters? And then this is one of those questions to ask, Prakash, right? So finding the right question there. And if it's like, I want people to be able to know how big Garbage Island is and have all the stats about sea turtles and straws in their noses and whatnot. And I don't care if they actually recycle and throw stuff away. Most probably wouldn't say that. Like, you want the behavior to change, but if they can't, they're not actually passionate, they're doing it for the wrong reasons, like in the littery, because they might win the lottery if they throw something away and properly sort it, which is a story in the book, then like, you just have to pick what's actually most important. So those are some of the things, but now I'm excited, and that's potentially going on to my list of future books. So if that's all right.
Super. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Renusha. That's really spurred Melina on. Get back and get writing, Melina.
Yeah.
for the next book. That's really super. Okay, so Arvind has come with a follow-up question. Arvind, would you like to put your question? I think this might have to be the last one. Would you like to put your question to Melina, Arvind?
Yeah, I don't mind doing that, but it's really windy where I'm taking the call from. So it just in case.
Absolutely, that's okay, Arvind. So Arvind here, Melina, is saying a follow-up question to the one Andy had raised. What sort of effort is being undertaken by nudge units to bridge the language jargon chasm?
So sorry, do you need a nudge unit? Is that what you said, or?
No, as in the language which behavioral scientists or behavioral economists use is not the one which, let's say, what marketeers use or any other department which uses, right? They all have their own language, so to speak, while they are talking about the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So framing is viewed in a different sort of manner by, say, a creative agency. A and B testing is viewed as something else.
Right.
So there seems to be some sort of a gap in the sort of communication which takes place between these two.
Thanks, Arvind.
buttons.
Yeah, what do you think of that, Melina?
Yeah, I've always been really an advocate of using the words that going to help somebody to properly read and to understand and get what they need. And so in the world of behavioral economists, me not talking about system 1 and system 2 continually throughout the book and the podcast is something that hardcore, behavioral econ folks would poo-poo, we'll say, like would sort of shun me for. And things like, I often don't talk about hyperbolic time discounting, but I call it the I'll Start Monday effect, right? Like things that will allow someone to get what they need enough to move forward. And so I think it is very important to give people the language that will allow them to work as far as, with the structure of the book. Like, I don't want people to be reading and go and where it says system 2 and they're like, okay, now which one was that again? Because if you stop to use your system 2 to understand which one I'm talking about, you're going to miss the point of the concept and it just doesn't matter for them, right? They just need to be able to get enough and move forward. So I'm a big fan of adjusting for your audience. And I think that should be done and that we can have deeper conversations with the perfect terms, at other times. So that's my thought on that.
Thanks so much, Melina. And as I said, we're coming to a close now, the last few minutes. So it just remains for me to thank all of you for joining us again today. It's only because you join us that we have this Behavioural Science Club. So thank you so much. Thank you, Jing, for joining us as co-host today with your absolutely excellent questions. I'm going to throw out a thank you to Daniel Bennett from Ogilvy for joining us today. Maybe that means, Melina, he'll put you on the top of his list for Nudge Stock 2022. Now he heard you. And also, before we leave, I don't know, Melina, if you would like to tell the group why I was a little bit anxious that you may not be able to join us.
Oh, did that come up somewhere? Well, hold on, let's see. Not to be weird, but we've got in here. So I'm 8 months pregnant at the moment. So that was where our timing was a bit of a question. So I haven't put it out on LinkedIn just because I'm still working. It's all good. So that is where we're at. But yes.
So congratulations to Melina from all of us. Good luck for the next few weeks. Hold in there tight, Melina, and I hope everything goes really well for you. Yeah. And so it just remains me to hand back to Prakash to wrap up the event. But thank you all so much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Jing, Louise, Melina. Congratulations. This is a bigger news. I mean, the books will come and go.
It's a big year. It's a big year over here, to be sure.
Very happy, very proud of you, all of us out here. And, wish you all the best with the book, the podcast, and the baby, and life. And for folks who've joined us today, please keep on joining back. Stay safe, wear your masks. I think the pandemic is more or less kind of, I think we are more than halfway done, I would say. At least I hope we're halfway done. So hang in there. Call your friends, call your parents, wear your mask, get your shots. And if you believe vaccines don't work, that's amazing too. But then why not make a show about it and join us, in one of the sessions and say, I don't believe in vaccines because of these reasons. And that can be a fantastic thing to do, right? Always nice to see hear a counterpoint. Before we go, Melina, we have I think 60 seconds, 1 minute. We do have it. You do a lot of things. You teach, you host an amazing podcast, and you've written, right? And you got so many things done. Is there any tip you can share with us out here before we go? Maybe something based around behavioral science. How do we also get things done the way you have been able to?
Yeah, I have a couple podcast episodes that can help with that. And I actually have a course on goals and things too that's available, just like a DIY one. But so mindset's a big deal with it. And the like boil it down is narrow your goals to where, like for me, for 2020, writing my book had been the goal. That was like the one, like if I do nothing else in 2020, that's like top of the list for me of being most important. And then, so have a big goal, know what's important, and then break the tasks into like 90-day sprints. And I have some worksheets that can help with that, to where you're able to then do like one thing a day, like small tasks for big goals with like little steps kind of as you move forward, so you can get those things done. And I had put a note in the comments too for anybody. I saw there were other questions and things. I definitely want to be able to answer as many as possible. Please, everyone, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, ask questions and connect in the group and everything. So I want to help and answer everybody and connect. So please do.
Thank you so much, Melina. And everyone, please, the URL is out there, LinkedIn ID. Please subscribe to the Brainy Business, buy the book. Stay safe, everyone. Have a nice weekend ahead. Bye.